Welcome to our deep dive, everybody. Today we're taking a close look at Stephen King's Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption. It's a story about friendship and resilience and hope, even when things are incredibly tough, really tough. It's amazing how a story set in a prison can resonate so strongly with, well, pretty much everyone.
You're right. It really does. It's all about that universal longing for freedom, right? And those connections we forge that give us strength and how hope can flicker even in the darkest places. It's something we can all connect with on some level.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting here is we've got two perspectives to work with, two different ways into the story. We have the original novella, which was published way back in 1982. It's actually part of a collection called Different Scenes. And then, of course, we have the screenplay for the film adaptation, the one that became a classic. So we could really explore how those two versions work together, see how they complement and maybe even contrast each other.
That's right. And it's fascinating to consider why Stephen King, the king of horror, chose to write this kind of story. What was it about Shawshank and these characters that grabbed him?
Exactly. It's not exactly typical Stephen King territory, right? I mean, no scary clowns or haunted houses here. Instead, we meet Andy Dufresne, this quiet, unassuming banker accused of a horrific crime, a double murder. His wife and her lover. Doesn't exactly scream wrongfully convicted, does he?
Not at first glance, no. And King uses that to his advantage. In that trial scene, the way the DA portrays Andy as this cold, calculating killer, it plays with our expectations. He focuses on Andy's demeanor, how emotionless he seems, and the missing murder weapon. It all casts doubt right from the start. And of course it works. Pretty much everyone at Shawshank believes he's guilty. The guards, the other inmates.
Everyone. And that's where Red enters the picture. He's our narrator. Inside Shawshank, Red's the guy you go to if you need anything. Cigarettes, a Marilyn Monroe poster, you name it. But he's also really sharp. He observes everything, understands how that whole prison ecosystem works.
Yeah.
And initially, he's just as skeptical of Andy as anyone else.
That skepticism is important because it makes the story feel grounded. He's not just telling us about Andy, he's going through this whole experience alongside us. So when Red begins to question his own doubts, we do too, King's bringing us along on that journey of discovery.
And it's a journey that takes us into the harsh realities of prison life. King doesn't shy away from the brutality. From the moment those fresh fish arrive, completely vulnerable, stripped naked, to the threat of the Sisters, that gang of predatory inmates, led by Boggs, who is absolutely terrifying. It's clear that survival in Shawshank is a constant struggle.
It really is. And it's not just the physical danger, it's that psychological pressure that gets to you. Think about Brooks Hatlin, the elderly librarian. Spends 50 years inside, becomes completely institutionalized. When he finally gets paroled, he just can't handle freedom. It terrifies him. And tragically, he takes his own life rather than face that uncertainty.
That's what makes Brooks's story so heartbreaking. He becomes a victim of the system, ground down by all those years of confinement. Makes you think about what freedom truly means. Is it just about being physically outside those walls, or is there something more to it?
You're right. That's the question. And it's something that Andy grapples with throughout the story. He sees all that violence, the despair, the way Shawshank slowly crushes the spirit out of so many men. But he also finds ways to resist, to carve out his own space, even in that awful environment.
Absolutely. He's surrounded by this darkness, but he doesn't let it consume him. He adapts, holds on to his dignity, and most importantly, he never gives up hope.
And that's where his strength comes through, that refusal to be broken. Remember when he asks Red for a rock hammer? Red just laughs at first, even bets Andy that he'll never get one. But Andy's persistent, quiet but determined. And he gets that rock hammer. That small act, it symbolizes his resilience, foreshadows his long-term plan.
It's like he's slowly chipping away at those walls, literally and figuratively. And then we have that scene on the roof when they're tarring. Andy uses his knowledge of finance, gets beers for everyone. It's a small victory, but important. Shows he can manipulate the system, bring a little bit of joy into that dehumanizing place.
That scene really shifts their relationship. It's where Red starts to see who Andy really is. A man who refuses to be defined by his circumstances. They share a beer, they laugh, it's a genuine connection. A powerful reminder of how human connection can thrive, even in the most bleak environments. And that friendship, that spark, it becomes a lifeline for both of them.
It really does. And it fuels Andy's next project.
Yeah.
Transforming that prison library. It starts small. He writes 1 letter a week to the state senate requesting funds.
It's amazing. 6 years of writing letters. Most people would have given up, but not Andy. He understands the power of knowledge, education. That's where true freedom lies. It's not just about escaping those physical walls, it's about escaping that mental and emotional confinement that Shawshank represents.
Exactly. And eventually those funds come through. Books start pouring in. He even sets up a little office for himself. And then he does something incredible.
Yeah.
Plays Mozart over the PA system for everyone to hear.
That scene, man, it gives me chills every time. It's about so much more than just music. It's about the power of art to transcend boundaries, to connect people on this deeper level. For a few minutes, that harsh reality of prison life fades away, and everyone experiences this shared beauty, pure hope.
It's a powerful reminder that even in a place designed to crush the human spirit, that need for beauty, for connection, for something that lifts us beyond our immediate circumstances, it can never be fully extinguished.
You're absolutely right. It speaks to that longing for something more, something that reminds us of our humanity, our capacity for joy. And in a way, it foreshadows Andy's eventual escape. It shows he's not just surviving, he's finding ways to truly live, even within the walls of Shawshank.
And speaking of escape, that's when Tommy Williams arrives, a young inmate who becomes Andy's student. He brings this whole new layer of hope to the story, but also ultimately heartbreak.
Yeah, for sure. Tommy's youthful energy, his naivete, it's a stark contrast to the cynicism of the other inmates. He represents a kind of innocence, a belief in second chances. And for Andy, he becomes a symbol of hope for a future outside those walls. He brings this fresh perspective, this glimmer of possibility. And he tells Andy the story about a former cellmate who bragged about killing a golfer and his lover. A story that, well, sounds an awful lot like Andy's case. Suddenly, there's a chance, a real chance, that Andy might be able to prove his innocence.
Yeah, it feels like a light at the end of a very, very long tunnel. But of course, Shawshank doesn't exactly hand out happy endings, does it? And this hope, it turns into this cruel reminder of how corrupt and unforgiving that system can be.
It really is. And the warden, Norton, he's like the embodiment of that corruption, right?
Wow.
His whole career, his whole image, it's built on maintaining order, appearing righteous, and Andy's innocence. The possibility of that truth coming out, well, it threatens everything he's worked for, so he does what he has to do, silences Tommy, orchestrates his death, crushes any hope that Andy had of clearing his name.
It's brutal. It's like just when you think Andy might actually catch a break, fate just kicks him back down.
Yeah.
And it pushes him to a breaking point. Red even talks about how he saw a change in Andy after Tommy's death. This kind of quiet despair he'd never seen before.
And that's what makes what happens next so powerful, because instead of giving in, Andy does the unthinkable. He just disappears.
Vanishes. One morning, he's gone. Poof.
The guards, they tear the place apart, right? And they find this hole in the wall behind Andy's poster of Raquel Welch. One of those posters Red got for him over the years. Those fantasy girls. They were like a running joke between them, Symbol of hope in the outside world. But nobody realized that poster was hiding Andy's escape route for years.
Years. And then they find it. The tunnel. 500 yards long, carved out with that tiny rock hammer leading into a sewer pipe. Can you imagine the patience? The sheer willpower it must have taken.
19 years. 19 years he spent chipping away at that tunnel. Never gave up hope. It's incredible.
Crawling through that filth, that darkness, is like a baptism, a symbolic shedding of his old life.
Exactly. He emerges on the other side, completely soaked but free. And he doesn't just escape. He gets his revenge, too. Uses his banking skills to create this fake identity, Peter Stevens, and systematically drains the warden's secret accounts. Exposes his corruption. Leaves a trail of evidence leading right back to Norton.
It's brilliant. The warden, so obsessed with control, gets completely outmaneuvered by the quiet banker he thought he'd broken. The irony is amazing.
It's like a chess match, right? And Andy played the long game, used his intelligence, his patience, and his hope to beat the system that tried to crush him.
But he doesn't forget his friends. Before escaping, he leaves Red a letter, tells him how to find a specific hayfield, the place where he proposed to his wife.
It's more than just a sentimental journey, though. Andy buried something there, something to help Red start a new life if he ever gets paroled, offers him a chance at the freedom he fought so hard for himself.
And Red's journey out of Shawshank, it mirrors Brooks's in a lot of ways. After all those rejections, he's finally granted parole. But like Brooks, he struggles to adjust to the outside world.
Remember that scene in the restroom? Red catches himself asking permission to use the bathroom. It's just heartbreaking. It shows how deeply institutionalized he's become. Freedom feels alien, scary. He even thinks about breaking his parole, going back to prison, because at least there he knows what to expect.
It's that pull of the familiar, right? That fear of the unknown. We can all relate to that, even if we've never been to prison. We get comfortable with our routines, even if they're not good for us.
You're right. It's that basic human need for security, for belonging. And sometimes a negative environment can feel safer than taking a leap into the unknown.
And that's where Andy's letter and the cash he left become so important for Red. It's like a lifeline, a reminder that there's more to life than just existing within those walls.
Exactly. Red follows Andy's instructions, finds that hayfield, digs up a box. Inside there's $1,000 and another letter. And Andy writes, "Hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies."
Powerful, right?
So powerful. It's a reminder that even when all seems lost, even in the darkest times, we can choose to hold on to hope.
And that's the turning point for Red. Andy's words, his belief in Red's potential, it gives him the strength to keep going. He realizes he has a choice. Give in to despair or embrace the uncertainty of freedom and follow his friend. And he makes an incredible decision. Red breaks his parole and heads south, leaves his own message carved next to Brooks's in the halfway house. So was Red. What a powerful image.
It really is. It's a testament to that enduring power of friendship and the transformative nature of hope. He chooses hope over fear, connection over isolation, and ultimately life over that slow death of the spirit that Shawshank represents.
It's amazing how King takes us on that emotional journey with Red. We feel his despair, his fear, but then ultimately that sense of triumph when he chooses hope, chooses life.
It really shows you the power of a good story, right? How it can evoke those emotions, make us connect with characters who are so different from ourselves, at least on the surface.
We've talked about hope, friendship, resilience, but there's also this undercurrent of defiance that runs through the whole story.
Absolutely. Andy and Red, they both refuse to let the system break them, each in their own way. They find ways to hold on to their individuality, their humanity, even in that dehumanizing place.
Right, like they're saying, we might be prisoners, but you can't control our minds. We're going to find our own meaning, our own purpose, even here.
Exactly. And that defiance, it's ultimately what sets them free. Not just physically escaping, but that mental and emotional liberation. They refuse to let Shawshank steal their hope, their dreams.
And that's what makes that ending so satisfying. When Red finally finds Andy on that beach in Zihuatanejo, working on that boat, it's like a visual representation of their shared dream. They both went through so much, overcame incredible obstacles, but they came out the other side stronger, more resilient, and free.
It's a beautiful ending, full of hope, the promise of a new beginning. And it leaves us with this question: what are the Shawshank moments in our own lives? Those walls we feel trapped by, those obstacles that seem impossible to overcome.
It makes you think about your own personal Zihuatanejo, right? That place, that dream, that sense of freedom you're striving for.
Exactly. Because even though most of us won't experience prison, we all have our struggles, our own internal battles. And Rita Hayworth in Shawshank Redemption reminds us that even when things seem darkest, hope can survive. Human connection can sustain us. And that pursuit of freedom, both physical and mental, it's a journey worth taking.
It's a story that stays with you. It reminds us that even when facing adversity, we have the power to choose hope, to build those meaningful connections, and to fight for what matters most. And ultimately, it's a story that inspires us to believe that even in the most hopeless situations, redemption is possible.
So as you go about your day, think about those small acts of hope and defiance that you can embrace. How can you chip away at those walls in your own life? Nurture those connections that bring you joy. Hold on to those dreams that keep you moving forward. Because even when faced with your own Shawshank, remember, hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things. And no good thing ever dies.